The Pacific Ocean stretched out in every direction, blue, calm, and deceptively quiet. Yet beneath the serene surface, June 1942 carried the weight of a conflict that would soon reshape the balance of power across the globe. On this vast stage lay a small, isolated outpost known as Midway Atoll, surrounded by thousands of miles of open ocean. To the untrained eye, it appeared insignificant, but to the commanders of the world's most powerful navies, Midway was the fulcrum upon which the Pacific War could turn. After months of sweeping victories, the Imperial Japanese Navy sought to eliminate the last major threat in the Central Pacific, the American aircraft carriers that had evaded destruction at Pearl Harbor. Their plan was bold: draw out and destroy the U.S. Pacific Fleet by striking Midway, forcing the Americans into a battle they could not avoid. The Japanese fleet, under the command of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto and frontline carrier commander Vice Admiral Chuchi Nagumo, sailed with confidence. Their vessels were considered the most experienced carrier force in the world. For frontline carriers, numerous cruisers, battleships, and an elite group of aviators who had honed their skills through years of warfare. On the American side, the stakes were existential. Still recovering from earlier losses, the U.S. Navy recognized that losing Midway and its remaining carriers could leave the entire Pacific vulnerable. Yet there was an unseen advantage. American cryptanalysts had broken significant parts of the Japanese naval code. Through careful analysis and bold intelligence work, U.S. Commander Joseph Rockefeller and his team identified Midway as the target before the Japanese fleet had even left port. This critical insight allowed Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, to prepare a calculated trap. 3 carriers, USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and the hastily repaired USS Yorktown, were positioned northeast of Midway, hidden beyond the Japanese reconnaissance net. From there, they would wait, silent and unseen, ready to strike at the most decisive moment. As the first days of June unfolded, Midway's defenders intensified their preparations. Marines dug defensive positions along the beaches, anti-aircraft crews tested their guns, and reconnaissance aircraft scanned the horizon searching for signs of the approaching armada. Meanwhile, on the Japanese carriers, pilots calmly rehearsed their attack runs, confident that their foes would be caught unaware. But the battle would not begin with clear skies and perfect intelligence for both sides. Fog, distance, and the vastness of the Pacific created an atmosphere of tension and uncertainty. The fleets moved like ghosts, never seeing each other directly, only sensing the growing danger through coded messages, radio intercepts, and distant flashes in the sky. In the early hours of June 4th, before sunrise, Japanese carriers launched their first wave toward Midway. Bombers and fighters roared into the darkness, igniting the first phase of the operation. They believed American carriers were far away. They believed the surprise was theirs. But beneath that same pre-dawn sky, U.S. aircraft were already taking off from Midway and preparing to strike in return. Far to the northeast, American carrier decks came alive. Fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo planes lining up, engines thundering. 2 powerful fleets were moving toward the same moment, a moment that would be decided in mere minutes. And as the sky brightened over the Pacific, both sides prepared to unleash everything they had. As the morning sun rose over the endless Pacific, the 2 fleets converged on an invisible line that would determine the battle's outcome. From afar, the Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, maintained their formations, unaware that their precise movements had already been anticipated by U.S. intelligence. In a calculated gamble, American dive bombers had positioned themselves to strike the Japanese decks at their most vulnerable moment, while refueling and rearming aircraft for successive attacks on Midway. Seconds, measured in preparation and timing, would decide the fate of entire carrier groups. At 7 o'clock hours, American scout planes made first contact. Spotting the Japanese fleet, they transmitted positions to Nimitz's carriers, giving the U.S. commanders a critical window needed to launch coordinated strikes. Within minutes, dive bombers roared into the sky, engines screaming, wings weighted with bombs calibrated to penetrate decks. The Japanese fleet, still expecting an attack on Midway itself, had only scattered fighter cover to respond. The first wave of bombs found their marks with devastating precision. Akagi erupted in flames as fuel and munitions ignited, followed quickly by Kaga and Soryu. Smoke columns rose like black towers, visible for miles across the open sea. Japanese aviators scrambled desperately to man defensive positions, but the concentrated attack had shattered their air groups and destroyed planes on the deck before they could take off. Hiryu, the last carrier still operational, launched a retaliatory strike, but American fighters intercepted and downed many of the planes, limiting damage to the U.S. fleet. Within the span of hours, the tide of naval warfare shifted dramatically. Where months earlier the Japanese had dominated the Pacific skies, now American pilots had demonstrated the decisive impact of intelligence, coordination, and timing. By late morning, 3 of Japan's 4 frontline carriers were engulfed in uncontrollable fires. Destroyers and cruisers scrambled to assist, but the concentrated American assault left little room for maneuver. Damage control teams worked frantically, but the scale of destruction was overwhelming. Meanwhile, the U.S. carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, remained operational, though Yorktown had already sustained damage from earlier air attacks. Rapid repairs and swift deck launches ensured continuous sorties against the retreating Japanese forces. The contrast between the two navies was stark. Where one fleet had been neutralized within hours, the other adapted quickly, leveraging intelligence, coordination, and resilience to maintain combat effectiveness. By afternoon, Hiryu was located and struck, leaving the Japanese carrier fleet effectively neutralized. Smoke and fire stretched across the horizon, marking the catastrophic loss of trained air crews, pilots, and seasoned sailors. Japanese Naval Command recognized the magnitude of the defeat. The ambition to draw the U.S. fleet into a decisive battle had backfired, costing them 4 of their 6 carriers and irrevocably weakening their offensive capacity in the Central Pacific. The human cost was immense on both sides. Hundreds of sailors and aviators lost their lives in the burning decks, plunging into the open ocean in desperate bids for survival. Yet beyond the tragedy, the Battle of Midway had delivered a profound strategic message. Intelligence, preparation, and timing could offset numerical or technological superiority. The Pacific War, until then dominated by Japanese initiative, had now shifted decisively. The momentum of the conflict had passed into American hands. By evening, as the surviving ships regrouped, the implications became clear. Midway was not only a tactical victory, it was a turning point. The Japanese Navy, once considered unstoppable in the Pacific, had been humbled in hours. American forces had proven that strategy, foresight, and courage could redefine the balance of power across the vast ocean expanse. The Battle of Midway would echo through history as a moment the tide of the Pacific War turned, a testament to precision, intelligence, and the extraordinary bravery of those who fought above and below the waves.